the Kerbal King here, and welcome to How Not to Kill Your Kerbals, an introductory crash course into Kerbal Space Program. So we're going to start with making a new save, and I'm calling it How Not to Kill Your Kerbals. It's going to be a sandbox save, and as far as difficulty options, we'll leave these, nope, and that, this, that, ComNet, of course, and it'll make it blackout and that, extra concentrations, and yeah, that's basically it. So the only mods I'm using is Kerbal Engineer Redux and the official Making History downloadable content. So we're going to start by going over the different facilities at the Space Center. Some of them only pertain to career and science mode. So this is the R&D building. It's basically where your tech tree is if you're playing career or science mode. And then the administration building and mission control have to do with contracts and different strategies in career mode. So the other buildings we have are the astronaut complex, where we can see all of our Kerbals and then hire more ones if we want to hire more of them. So if we're say I want another person, I could always hire them, but I don't need one now. And then some of the other buildings are the tracking station, where we can see the entire Kerbal solar system. So this is Kerbin. And then if you scroll out, you have the moon, or Mun, as it's called. And then you have Minmus, Duna, which is sort of like Mars, Ike, which is its moon, Dres, which is sort of like a planet in the asteroid belt. And you have Jewel, which is Jupiter with 4 different moons. And then Elu, which is kind of like Pluto. And then you have the sun, of course. And then Moho, which is basically Mercury. And Eve, which is like Venus and its tiny moon. And then here we have different launch sites, which come with the DLC. That's where everybody has, which is the Space Center. And then the airfield is, you can see it in a regular game, except it actually acts as a runway now. Then we have the desert, which is an airfield and launch site. And then Woomerang, which is another launch site. So then the other buildings we have is the spaceplane hangar and the VAB, and they act the same way. They're editors, which you can then either shoot your rockets off of the launch pad or your planes off of the runway. So for now, we're going to look into the VAB and build a basic rocket. So here in the VAB, we have our workspace, and then these are all the parts we can build stuff out of. So, because it's a sandbox game, we have all the parts unlocked already. And if you get the game, you might notice there are fewer parts, and that's only because I have the DLC, which is very good. I would recommend getting that also. But otherwise, the stock game doesn't have quite as many parts. So let's just start with a basic rocket. We have our command pods here, and they basically allow you to control stuff, put your Kerbals in it, and then you have different like computer cores. So yeah, I'd start with a basic Mark 1 command pod. It's pretty simple. Next tab you have is fuel tanks, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's just tanks that hold fuel. So let's find a nice sized one. The game has different sizes, which go from the smallest 0.625 meters on the top down to 5 meter diameter, which is the biggest ones. But the size here is 1.25 meters, so we'll put that tank on there. And then go down to the next tab is engines. You have them in all different sizes, couple different types. So you have solid engines, which is light 'em and go, and then all your liquid rocket engines, and then you have some like jet engines. So those are the main types. And then you also have ion engines and nuclear engines, which I'll talk about in another video. Here, a pretty good one should be the swivel, because it has a decent amount of thrust, a decent weight, and a good ISP, which is basically like efficiency or gas mileage. So you want a high ISP. And yeah, up here, this box is the only other thing that you might not have. It's a mod called Kerbal Engineer Redux, and you can download it for free off of the KSP forums. Just search Kerbal Engineer in Google and it will come up. And then if you need to install it, you just copy it into your game data folder, or use a mod manager named CCAN, which is very helpful. That's also on the forums. So yeah, this will get us up in the air, and you have your thrust to weight ratio. As long as that's above a 1, that's good. But this is in vacuum, so you go to atmospheric, and you can see how it is at different altitudes. So yeah, even on the ground, it has enough thrust, which is good because you want to get off the pad. Put that over there. So then the next thing we have is command and control, which is like reaction wheels, which just turn your thing using power, but they're sort of, compared to real life, overpowered. And these are like RCS jets, so little thrusters to move your spacecraft around. Next is structural, so that's like tubes and I-beams and all that stuff. Something good also are these clamps, which basically hold your rocket into place before you launch. And say you want to put them on symmetry, like I want to put 2 of them, I hit X, which puts it into 2-way symmetry, and if I hit C, it snaps it to make it nice and neat. You can also do them by clicking down there or clicking here. Another thing next we have is coupling. That's for like docking ports if you want to put stuff together in space, or separators if you want to like have multiple stages, which we'll get to in a little bit. Then payload, they're like cargo bays and different nose cones and all that stuff. And then aerodynamics, you have nose cones and fins. Fins are nice for controlling stuff because there's 2 good ways to control stuff. And just notice how this is going to be a 4-way. That means I put 4 fins on. And then we can just either put 4 of those or just put 2 of them. So yeah, these are one of the ways for controlling it in flight. Fins, and also the engine gimbal, because you can like move a little bit to steer you. So yeah, all your nose cones, wings, and other aerodynamic things are in here. Next you have ground, which is like landing legs and wheels, which we'll get to later. Then thermal, that's like radiators and heat shields, which we don't need for this, but we will need. And then electrical, which is like solar panels and batteries. Again, for this basic thing, you don't really need it because it's just going to go up and go down. Communications, same thing. It's only really needed for space because this has a little built-in antenna, but we can put one of the small ones on there just to make sure. It doesn't need it, but always good to have. And then if you want to mount it radially, I can use the WSA and D keys to rotate it around. So, yeah. Then I can rotate it like that. You can also go in using 1, 2, and 3, or these buttons. 1 is just placing, 2 is like I want to move it around, or 3 is rotate it, and 4 is rerouting. That's basically, this is the root part. I could change it to this if I wanted to. Then science is basically little experiments. We don't need to do these because we're not in a career mode, but yeah. And then you have these parts. These 2 parts are added in by Kerbal Engineer, and you need to use those, I think, to get Kerbal Engineer, but unless you don't have an engineer, but I feel like that also might only be in career mode, so we'll find out if I don't put one of these on there. And then this is the utility / odds and ends. This thing is really important. It's a parachute so that you don't come crashing down at high speeds. You also probably would want to make a softer landing by putting a decoupler on the rocket. So yeah, over here is staging. It basically tells you in what order stuff is going to happen. So currently it's all messed up, but we should say light the engine, then release the clamps, then you can separate the capsule, and then deploy the parachute. And then yeah, let's just call it something. Or just call it the very imaginative puddle jumper. Perfect. So yeah, then you can we can change where we launch it from, but for now we're just going to stick to the regular launch pad. Also, you can move the whole thing around if you click on the root part and just you move your mouse and mouse wheel to go up and down. So yeah, we can just hit save to save the craft and launch. Okay, so here we are on the launch pad. The only thing I did was under settings in the main menu, if you hit escape, you go to settings. I just moved the nav ball off to the side so it's easier to see, because generally being right in the middle of the screen can be annoying. You can also change the scaling on this, but I'm going to leave it big so people on smaller screens can see it. So yeah, over here you have your nav ball. You can enable SAS, which is kind of like auto control, and then it turns out in sandbox mode you don't need the little computer core, so notice we don't have it, and we already have all the Kerbal engineer stuff. So you have the HUDs up here, which you can configure if you wanted to. You also have all the information over here if you want to, but if you turn all of these on, it can get a little bit annoying. So over here we have the SAS. It basically stability control to keep it more stable. Right now it's just having stability assist. You can also do other things with it, which I'll show you once we get into space. And then over here is your throttle, shift and control bring it up and down, and Z brings it all the way up, and X brings it all the way down. But we're going to want to throttle up. And then over here we have the staging. So each action happens when I hit space. So if I hit space now, it lights the engine, and then if I hit space again, it will release the clamps. And up we go. If I use A and D to control pitch, you can see how the fins are turning, and the engine is also gimbaling a little bit to help point it. Those are the two ways of controlling stuff. You also can tell it to point prograde, which is directly along the direction it's traveling. It's forward velocity. So yeah, I can do that. You can also, this is a lot of control authority, so that's nice. You can just tell it to point prograde, and it should get pretty high. It might even make it in space. Here, unlike real life, the atmosphere has a sharp cutoff of 70 kilometers, unlike real life where it just keeps going until because even at hundreds of kilometers up, you still have a little bit of atmosphere. So you have to deal with orbital decay and all that stuff, which isn't having to be dealt with in Kerbal, which makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, that's one of the smaller differences between Kerbal and real life. That and it only simulates physics based on one body instead of all the bodies. So right now, the sun isn't having any effect on the craft, but that's not really a big deal. So yeah, as you can see, we're about to be in space. 70 kilometers is space. So yeah, we can also hit spacebar again to decouple the lower booster. And then here we can play around with the other things. If I turn SAS off, it's a lot we'll keep spinning basically. have to turn it back on, it stops. You can either go prograde, which is forward based on your velocity. Retrograde is backwards. Normal and anti-normal are up and down, and then radial in and out is either away from the planet or facing the planet. So yeah, because we're going to be re-entering, we're going to go retrograde. And then also using the period and slash keys, we can accelerate time, which basically accelerates the universe time, so you don't have to wait around for like hundreds of days if you're going to the different planets or stuff like that. Basically speeds everything up. And also, if you notice, like, you don't spin at all. So like if I'm spinning, say I'm like spinning out of control, I can time warp. Oh, it won't do that actually because I'm in the atmosphere, which brings up a point. In the atmosphere, you can't time warp, because basically when you time warp, it puts you on rails, so you can't change anything. In the atmosphere, you can only go up to 4 times, and it's actually doing the physics in 4 times, which sometimes is not good. Also, depending on what your computer specs are, it will have a lot worse. Like, basically, a lot of stuff can explode, which is not good. So here we are, we're just coming back down. On these type of ones, it doesn't really matter how you fly on the way up. It's not that important. And as you can see, you have the debris over there. Yep, and we're in the middle of the ocean. So we can again, in a little bit, hit spacebar to deploy the parachute. Ideally, you do it about now, but then that entails a lot of sitting around and waiting, which is not fun. So at like 5 kilometers, I'll deploy the parachute. Just hit space, and it will deploy the parachute. At first, it doesn't deploy it all the way. That happens at 1 kilometer is the full deployment. It just basically to not have as much force on the capsule and the crew when the parachute deploys. So here, coming up on 1 kilometer, it's going to inflate fully and slow you down. Nice and good. So as you can see now, you can do physical time. It will warn you that it will affect the structural stability, and that is true, but as you can see, it's even in the green now. The way the clock works, in the green it means it's doing the physics in real time, and then yellow and red mean it's not doing it quite as efficient. As you can see, it's kind of in the green right now, even if I time warp physically, because this craft is not that big and my computer is pretty powerful. But yeah, you see we are on the ground, so you can just go up here. You either go back to the Space Center or recover, which picks the thing up and you go back to the Space Center. So you'll collect all that stuff and you'll get some money back for it if you use career mode. But yeah, we can work on doing a bigger orbital mission in the next episode. So for now, I'd like to say thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and have a nice day.